Sobre la sombra de un cuerpo se construye una oración. En el tiempo en que te tengo, imagino tu canción.
Alright, cheers everyone, and welcome back to another video about a book that you possibly don't know, and more accurate this time, a writer, an author that you probably don't know, as I'm going to be discussing a couple of different books, but the book that I have a copy of is this one by Sven Lindqvist, called The Shadow Latin America Faces the 70s. I first encountered this writer by reading David Shields' Reality Hunger Manifesto, where I noticed that apart from just points how he structures, he also names a lot of books. And as I'm always on the hunt for books that I don't know, I made a list of all the books, and then every now and then I check one out of that list. And one of them was not this book actually, but another book by Lindqvist, called A History of Bombing, where rather than just providing a history of strategic military bombing, it's structured in a kind of cool but odd way, where there are 399 paragraphs structured chronologically. You just read them chronologically, but every little paragraph refers to another paragraph as a sort of hypertext. And there are, I think, about 20 sort of quote-unquote entrances in that book, where you follow just one line, which is about the memoir of his dad in bombing. Another entrance throughout that book, another line, would be about literary criticism, about literature focusing on strategic bombing. Another one would be looking at laws, different kind of laws throughout the time, concerned about bombing or just military actions. Yet another one would be perhaps just an actual history, or a developmental, innovation type history. So it was a very, very good book. I can highly recommend that, and that made me more interested in the writer himself. So the second book I picked up was this one. It's a much older work by him. It's written in the 60s. It's talking about Latin America and predictions of how they will go into the 70s. I was a bit hesitant of making a video about this book, because obviously it's dated. It's about a time long gone, but throughout the book there is his method is really interesting. His method about writing, about tackling all these topics. And I believe that Lindqvist earlier in life traveled to China because he was quite, enamored with the culture, and instead found out that it wasn't all that great. You couldn't really be, I think he said something like that you can't stay positive when traveling to dependent countries, right? The non-development, the third world countries. He after that he wrote a book about India as well, where he says something along the lines that he couldn't imagine any political or economical structure that would solve the problems they faced in India. And then in Latin America as well, he's a bit more positive about Latin America, luckily, but still it's very, very nice sort of honesty in his writing. He doesn't consider himself an economist or a historian or a journalist or anything like that. He says, I'm a writer, and what he writes about for most of the time is sort of forced by necessity. Nobody else is doing it, so then I have to do it. There's one particular quote on this that I'd like to read a bit. So no postcards this time, because I didn't have enough to specifically point out to you. But so I'll just do it the old-fashioned way. But it starts here. Basically, it's about what I just said. him not being an economist or only by necessity. So he says something like this. I'll skip over a bit. "This isn't my job," I thought furiously as we left. "This is a job the economists and contemporary historians should have done for me. I'm a writer. Every minor poet these days qualifies for a biography. But who will write a biography of the Marcona Mining Company? Who is currently studying the influence of the Southern Peru Copper Corporation? Who is researching the history of the Cerro de Pasco Corporation? These giant companies that move mountains, create towns and level them once more to the ground, that intervene in the lives of millions, and whose influence extends over centuries and continents. What makes them so uninteresting from a scientific point of view? There must be something radically wrong with research when it turns its back like this on the great questions in economics and contemporary history, leaving it to the writers to dig for the most elementary facts about the world we live in." So that's the quote I wanted to read. Here we see it's the next chapter. Him blowing up like this is something that I really appreciated. I think this is a sentiment we don't often see too much. Maybe nowadays more than a while back, but it's still when. Well, first of all, I don't really know all that much about Latin America before I started reading this book, but it's interesting to see that, at least in his stories, there are these certain companies, mostly US-based companies, that have such an immense influence on villages, on giant strokes of land, or just the entire country. And it's strange that would be, as he says, what is he doing there, basically? Why must a Swedish writer have to take the heft in his own hands and start writing about these companies? Yeah, why isn't this already a well-discussed topic? At least at that time. Maybe nowadays it's much more, as I said, it's nowadays, but personally I don't really recognize it, apart from a select few journalists. But usually this is something that, especially in non-Western countries, who really cares about non-Western countries enough to start writing about these giant waves? Instead, they could be writing about the minor poets. And I guess that precisely the audience that would probably want to watch this video would probably care about the minor poets. I would care about the minor poets, but it does make a salient point where, if we look at pure influence or lives changed, it's strange that just like someone just writing, just say, "Hey, I'm a writer." Why does he have to do it? So I thought it's a very good quote. I probably won't forget it for quite a while. Maybe a little bit more about this book in particular. So let's look at the contents really quick. Well, first of all, what's also really interesting, what immediately grabbed me when I started reading, was this first bit in the sort of suburb. Well, how do you call it? Well, the chorillos, as it says there. But it's interviews with all these people about their personal lives and their problems at that time. And what was so incredibly stunning in these interviews is that most of them don't consider a way out. They don't see any way out. Where if we would look at these problems, is someone, let's just say here, Ana Castaño Ormendo, with an N. There are 8 of them living in the house. A couple have been ill. Everything is gone, and they earn not a lot of money, and this is their life. Nowadays, we would look at all these things and say, well, maybe the politics can solve this, and maybe a new mayor or something, or a larger influence a new party, something like that. But most of these people, they don't consider politics as an answer as well. At least somewhere, someone says, if you go into politics and you don't become rich by the end of it, you're an idiot. People think you're an idiot because that's the way you earn money. That's not the way to start earning, or well, not earning, but start supporting your community. Is just a way of getting into a better social position. And that was just really, quite confronting, I'd say, because at least in the country I live in, and in at least quite a lot of European countries, I'd say, there are a lot of problems still, of course, but people, and there are also quite a lot of disillusioned people, but most of the time when people have problems, there is this overwhelming idea that if we just elect the right people, or if we just push the right policies, then life will be better. And for these people interviewed, they don't think that. They don't consider that. Like, it's not something they think about, which is just so strange. At least to me, because I'm not used to that. Yeah. So, other than that, it's also quite interesting. It's quite a lot of little numbers every now and then. He does do his research for sure. So, well, we get these couple of images as well. Talks about all these different kinds of topics. So we saw revolution. It's talking about violence. It's talking about the companies itself. It's talking about the religion and how it's helping or maybe hurting. Last bit is about Peru, because they nationalized the mining company there. And this is kind of right in the middle of, or right before that. Talking about right before that. But then also he just asks for these numbers, and because he's a Swede, he's a complete outsider, so he usually gets all these numbers by just asking for them and saying, hey, I'm interested, and talks with all these people, and then he just starts maybe like a little bit of calculation and finds out how much of, in this case, profit is either non-reported or just taken away, not going back into the Peruvian economy, but just taken away to the US or England or elsewhere. So it's quite interesting. I'd say if you want to read this, read it if you're interested in, I guess, Latin America in the 70s, or these kinds of problems. And also if you're interested in this kind of method, this sort of almost sort of, journalism, very opinionated journalism, right? It's not as if he's trying to be objective. He's just trying to get at the facts. But he very much does have an opinion on why something is wrong or why something is right. I don't really have a lot to talk about the book itself, because this was kind of my struggle as well. I do think he's a great writer, and I do want to read more of him. But simultaneously, this book is sadly the only one I have a copy of at the moment. I could make a video about a history of bombing, but I didn't have that one. So then I figured, you know what, I'm just gonna make a combination video about Lindqvist, because I do think he's an absolutely brilliant author. If you haven't read him, read more. And also, just check him out. I do really appreciate his work. I'm definitely going to read more. He also has, I recently read the third book that I read by him, called Bench Press, which is something else entirely, of course. It's basically his sort of musings or pensives about working out and transformation, and why someone would do it, or how someone would be, how you could see someone. And the journey starts by him meeting a very trained man in a sauna, where basically Lindqvist thinks why would you do this? Why would you spend your life training so much? Why can't you just be happy with the body that you have? And then the man responds, well, you're a writer, you say. Why would you just be happy with your first draft? Right? If you would never say to someone, I hope every artist would be just able to say, yes, I'm glad with my first draft. Where Lindqvist did say, I want everybody to just be happy with how their body looks. So from that, Lindqvist gets sort of roped in to going to the gym. Actually calls the man he talked with, which is apparently, he said he looked like a sort of skinhead, very dangerous looking fella, but he called him his Virgil, to Lindqvist Dante in the world of bodily transformation, let's say. And apart from that, because with Lindqvist it's never completely straightforward. Sorry. I lost my voice for a better part of a month, which is also, so it's better now, but every now and then takes a bit of effort. But yeah, it's not completely straightforward. It's apart from that, it's interspersed with just what thoughts about transformation, books about bodybuilding, a lot of bodybuilding history or just exercise history, things like that. A lot of sort of idols and bits and pieces about heroes of Lindqvist, who would, in God's name, go and do this specific thing, right? Why is Lindqvist so taken with the idea of what some of his idols have done? And he is also very, very much enamored with the landscape of the Saharan desert, which in his life he actually visited as well and wrote a book about, which was supposed to be sort of the last chapter of Bench Press, but he made a completely different book about it. I think it's called Terra Nullius, but I'm not quite sure. I should look it up. But yeah, overall, it's sort of, it's really good. Let's stay there, right? It's really good. You should read it. Maybe read that more easily than this. Exterminate All the Brutes. I haven't read that, but that's also one of his more read works. There are also quite a lot of works that aren't translated yet, about 20 or 30 that are not translated to English, at least. So any Swedish speaking people watching this, get on that. No, yeah, but it's every now and then with good books, right? Good books are good books, and we enjoy them because they're really good and they make us think. And with this, it's not so much, for me at least, that I appreciate the book, but it's more that through the book I really appreciate the author. Reading this and how he views the world is something that I really, really respect, and I wish more people would do. When I'm reading Bench Press, or when I read A History of Bombing, or The History of Bombing, not sure which, I had the same thing. I thought, this man really, I don't know exactly what he's doing, but I really respect the person behind the book, rather than just what's on the page. On the page is also great, don't get me wrong, but yeah, that's really, I'm absolutely going to continue reading him, at least in the back. I think he has there was a list of a couple of works that I wanted to discuss very briefly, because well, never mind. Yeah, I wanted to discuss what he wrote, but obviously this is quite old. In his later life, he wrote much more widely, let's say. That's more about general topics or combined histories rather than... So he wrote about China, he wrote about India, he wrote about Latin America. But afterwards he wrote about humankind, right? Like humanities, or not humanities, sorry, like just strategic bombing throughout the world, which mostly comes down to Western countries attacking either themselves or third world countries. Exterminate all the brutes is also very similar, where it's a sort of bigger picture about, I think, colonialism, if I'm not mistaken. Because exterminate the brutes is obviously the exterminate all the brutes is the Joseph Conrad novel Heart of Darkness. So it's about colonialism as well. But overall, I don't want to make this video too long, because hey, I took like an hour to talk about in my previous video to talk about a single book, and now I briefly discussed 3, maybe about 25 minutes, which is or maybe 20 minutes, who knows, which is a good sign. Takes a bit of less effort for me to mention it. I'll try to put the names of the other 2 books with the image, or maybe a bit of text, so you can see what I'm talking about instead of me just rambling talking about a different book than lies in front of me. I'll try to put that in post. So not sure how that's going to work, but we'll see. And yeah, I'll try to upload a bit more, because I do really like making this video, even though I'm not very fast at it or good at it. But yeah, that's about it. Check out the author, Sven Lindqvist. And well, if you're interested, read this book. It's not that long. It's quite interesting. There's some very salient points made. And even though it's in some way horribly out of date, because it's written some 50 years ago, on the other hand, are good ideas ever truly out of date? Ponder about that. All right. So if you have, I'm just going to keep saying this, if you know of a sort of book that needs to be uncovered, that needs to be, that you know, that nobody else knows, just, or if you have any thought whatsoever about maybe Lindqvist, or just something you wanted to share, please do below in the comment section. I like reading those. Leave a like if you liked it, dislike it if you dislike it, I guess. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Alright, cheers.